And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to August. Can you believe it? I am so excited to talk with our guest today. Katie Powner is an award-winning author of contemporary fiction. Her stories often come from perspectives that stay with me long after I turn the last page. Katie lives in Montana with her family, and I can't wait for you to get to know her better. Before we begin, I'd appreciate it if you would take a moment to follow me on social media. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin. I love talking to authors and sharing our conversations with you, so be sure to follow me if you want to know who is coming up next. But for today, let's bring in our guest. Well, hello, Katie, and welcome.
Hi, Erin. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So your new book, When the Road Comes Around, releases tomorrow. Congratulations. Can you tell us and the listeners what this book is about?
Well, the book is set in southwest area of Montana, and it's set on Come Around Ranch, which is a fictional ranch. And it's about a guy named Tad he's 24, and he has a pretty bad reputation around town. He's been in a lot of trouble, and it's a small town, so everybody knows. And he gets a chance to work at Come Around Ranch for the summer. Dan and Anita, who own the ranch, are willing to hire him on for the summer on a trial basis. And so he really wants to prove himself, prove that he's not just a screw-up. And Dan and Anita, they have their doubts. And of course, when Tad comes to the ranch to work, everything in everyone's lives gets flipped upside down.
All right. Now, have you and your family ever stayed at a guest ranch like in this story?
No, we have not. I mean, there are several around here. Obviously, in Montana, that is a pretty big thing. We've seen lots of them, you'll drive past them and stuff, but we've never actually stayed at one. I think partly, when you live kind of in the rural farming community, you kind of maybe feel like you already do live, you already do it. You don't really need to go to the guest ranch, I guess.
Yes, I can see that. And I live close to Branson, but I don't actually do a lot in Branson. I'm close enough that I can enjoy it and far enough away that I don't have to deal with the tourists. So that's very nice.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. Yes, it's like the best of both worlds, so that's
yes.
kind of the same.
Now, your website's tagline for this book is, "Only trouble can bring about the beauty of redemption and grace." And this is so true. And we're in the middle of trouble ourselves. That's not what we feel or what we want to believe all the time. And I know I've been in situations where I thought, I don't see how anything good could come out of this except a deeper relationship with God. And then immediately was like, well, I wonder if that's actually what it's all about.
Wait a minute.
But of course, God always goes above and beyond anything that we can see when we're in the moment, when we're in our trouble that we're in. And he always surprises me with what he brings from it, not just in relationship with him, which does grow, but also in my life. And have you had similar experiences?
Yes. I mean, I would say we just are coming out of one like that just recently involving one of our foster kids that we've had, and we've been fostering for about almost 10 years. And I think that's something that happens a lot in this kind of world of foster care, orphan care, is that a lot of times things do go wrong or things, because you don't have foster care unless things are going wrong, right?
Right.
It's not needed. It doesn't exist unless things are going very wrong. And so a lot of times then we get in these situations and we have these kids in these situations that are very bad. And sometimes, just even recently with the one child that we had, we think, how can this possibly be redeemed, or how could this possibly work out for good? Because it seems so messed up. It seems so bleak. And of course, God's always working behind the scenes and you can't see it necessarily. And you just think, well, there's got to be something, or what is happening? And this can't be. And then, of course, God will come through in a big way. And you'll be like, oh, this is even better than what we had been praying for, like we had been praying kind of small, like if we could just at least get this one issue resolved, Meanwhile, God's working behind the scenes with a much bigger, better plan saying, I'm going to take care of that issue, but I'm also going to do all these other things that you didn't even think to dream of.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's such a good reminder. I kind of needed that today. That was good to hear. Now, your books also have special animals in them. So, for example, there's Steve the cat and Pearl the pot-bellied pig and Cinderella the chicken. Those are all from different books. And now you have TJ the rescue horse. Why do you include animals in your stories?
It's such a great question. I mean, first of all, I love animals. I mean, and I grew up on a dairy farm around animals and stuff. And so like that's a big part of it. But also I love that animals can reveal what a character is really like in a story. You know, you can bring out sides of them that you maybe wouldn't see when they're interacting with people. I think the characters and people in real life are their true selves when they're just around, when they are around an animal. So to me, that just is so great for in a story, so that the readers get to see a different side of the character in the story.
That's a good point. It's sort of like a behind the scenes look, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And then gives them someone to kind of interact with still. I mean, you could have them just like standing in a field, like pondering their life, but it's way more interesting and effective if they're doing that next to a cow, for example, you know, and talking to the cow.
Yes.
It just so the animals can just serve so many different roles in a story. Plus, animals are just really cool. So
Yes. And memorable too, since, I clearly remember all of these from your past books.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Now, I love how all your books tell stories from different seasons of life, and that's extra apparent in your book, Where the Blue Sky Begins. And you've got a young professional ready to take on the world and a woman with terminal cancer getting ready to leave this world behind. And the juxtaposition is just beautifully and thoughtfully done. What inspired you to write that novel?
Well, that novel, this is going to sound so funny because the novel is, it's very poignant and thought-provoking and kind of serious because there's a terminally ill character. But the origin of the story is actually pretty humorous because I was driving into town one day. So, because we live just out in this little tiny town. So for any kind of appointments or anything, you have to drive to a different town, a bigger town. So we're driving into the bigger town for an appointment. And I got off the freeway, and there's kind of this connecting road from the freeway to then this other highway. And it's a pretty, narrow, there's not really a shoulder, not a place for a scooter, for example. But lo and behold, I'm driving this little road, and here's this lady on a scooter right in this little, on this tiny little shoulder, driving her little scooter, and she's got this big trench coat on and this purple helmet, and the scooter's going pretty slow, and I'm trying not to, it's pretty tight, so you're trying not to get near her, and I just thought, what is she doing, and this is in the middle of summer, so it's really hot out. This is just not a place that you would expect to find this happening. So I just, of course, had to ask all these questions, what is she doing? Where is she going? Why is she, dressed in such warm clothes when it's 90 degrees? And so my imagination, of course, just started kind of running wild at that point, imagining all these scenarios of why would she be doing this? Does she just not have a car if she just has to get somewhere and this is her only way to get there,
Uh-huh.
So the next thing you know, I have all these ideas about this woman and what she might be going through, and pretty soon then she becomes the main character in my book.
It is so interesting how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, totally unexpected.
Yes. And now your book, The Wind Blows in Sleeping Grass, has a garbage truck driving main character who made me think of the phrase, one man's trash is another man's treasure, in a whole new light. And it's Pete's perspective on people that makes it so thought-provoking. Where did the character of Pete come from?
So my brother lives up on the High Line in Montana, which is where that book is set. The Wind Blows in Sleeping Grass is set up in that northern area. It's called the High Line, and it just stretches across that little northernmost part of Montana. And Sleeping Grass is a fictional town, but he lives up there in Cut Bank, which is also mentioned in the story, and it's a real town, and he is the garbage man for the city of Cut Bank. And so he does that, what Pete does. He drives up and down the alleys doing the trash, and he would tell me sometimes stories about things that he would see, things that he would notice, people that he would run into, or just things that you would kind of were able to learn about the occupants of a certain house based on their trash, which I just found so fascinating. That idea of what you could learn about somebody by seeing what they throw out.
That really is so interesting as a concept.
Right. And so he would tell me about this stuff, and I just could not, get past it. I just thought this is so interesting, and just to think of all the things that you would notice, that you could learn about, that you could observe while being largely unobserved yourself, because nobody really pays attention to the garbage man, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't really notice them, but if they noticed everything, just think of then what they would learn while being largely invisible. And so that was the inspiration for The Wind Blows in Sleeping Grass.
I just love how he sees people in a different way than other people do because of his unique view into their lives.
Right. Yeah.
And
A very unique perspective. And I had never thought much about that perspective until my brother,
right.
was doing that job. And I thought, oh, that is such an interesting way to look at the world.
Yes. You kind of see what they value and what they don't value, and
Right.
and even as you
Right.
dig into the story, the people that other people might undervalue, there's
Right.
value there as well.
Right.
So Where the Blue Sky Begins and The Wind Blows in Sleeping Grass both won Christie Awards, which is just so exciting to be honored among the best of Christian fiction. What does it mean to you to have them honored in such a way?
Well, it was super exciting, obviously. I mean, I never expected that, especially those back-to-back wins. Like, it was a huge surprise and also hugely just fun and exciting. But, I have told a few people this, that, that was never the goal. My goal was never that I want to win an award, or that this is the kind of book that I need to be putting out as the kind that, this establishment would choose for a award or something like that. Was never really, my goal. So it's like a super fun and exciting thing, but it's definitely not anything that I ever was like working towards, I guess, if that makes sense. So I guess that makes it even more fun because then it's just like a happy surprise.
Yeah, that's true. So you're writing just to explore the world and tell the stories that are on your heart, but then sometimes those end up touching other hearts the most,
Right. Yeah. And I do want that.
Yes. So you have a signature look, and that first and foremost comes with your red shoes. Where did your love for red shoes come from?
Okay, so my grandma Julie, who is also the same grandma that my second book, A Flicker of Light, is dedicated to, she was the one when I was growing up who was into the red shoes, specifically red Converse, the All-Star Converse shoes. She always would wear them, but she also then would make sure everyone had a pair. And so whenever all of the extended family would meet in the summer for like a camp out or a barbecue at their property that they had or whatever, then we would all wear the shoes and everyone would, like get the family pictures wearing the shoes, and all the grandkids would line up, tall to small, wearing the shoes and things like that. And so it was kind of just a fun thing that she had us doing. And then as I got older and she started getting older and also was then starting to have some dementia, I kind of started to take that on for myself, that I would continue with the red shoes. So I have a little tiny pair. It was the last pair that she ever bought before she passed away for my firstborn son, Michael. So he was the first great grandchild for her.
Oh,
of hers.
yeah.
And so, and I'm thankful she was able to, to meet him and was still able to, was alive to meet him and then give him his first pair of red Converse. And they're just like a tiny little pair. So now my mascot Moulin wears those shoes, that little pair.
Yeah.
And then Grandma Julie wears her pair in heaven. So.
Yeah. Well, that is really special. And I didn't realize that those are the shoes that Moulin wears, that they're from your grandma.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That she bought for her first grandchild. Yep.
Super special. And I wanted to ask you about your own personal mascot, Moulin. So how did Moulin come into your life?
Well, my first book that was published, it's called The Sewing Season, and it came out in 2020. And as I was leading up to that release, as I was kind of preparing for it, and this is my first book, so I was kind of learning as I went along, what should I do for, marketing, or trying to think about what do you post online, because I'm not real into social media and stuff. So it was kind of a challenge to figure out. And plus it was 2020. So obviously there's a lot of other things going on at the time.
It has its own set of challenges.
Yeah. So it was just kind of tricky. And a friend of mine, a neighbor just who lives down the street, she was coming by for some other purpose, and I don't even remember what it was. But she was on her way to the Goodwill, and she stopped at my house for some other purpose. And I happened to see then, oh, she had these bags in the, back of her van or whatever that she was taking to Goodwill. And Moline was in one of those bags, and her little head was popping out of there. And I said, oh, you have this stuffed cow back here. Are you taking this to the Goodwill? And she said, yeah, it used to be, my kids used to play with it, but they're all grown now. They are all have their own families, and I'm so, so I'm getting rid of some of their old toys and everything. And I said, well, could I have her? And she's like, I mean, go ahead. Here's the cow, She's like, sure, if you want. And I just grabbed her and brought her home and just thought, I just think this is the perfect little, like, at the time I wasn't thinking mascot. I was thinking more of a spokesperson for my book, because the sowing season is about a dairy farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And Moline is a dairy cow. And so in my mind, I was at the time just thinking, well, this ties into my book. It's something that I could post about, like there's cows in the book,
Right.
So it just kind of made sense. But then from there, it kind of snowballed into a much bigger thing where she became the spokesperson for my whole brand.
Yes.
And so that's how she came about. So now I bring her anytime I have a conference or an author event, a book release party or anything like that. Or if I'm going to some cool place, I bring her with
Yes.
and get, so it's been really fun.
People want to meet Moline and get their picture with her, right?
Yeah. And people are always like, what's with the cow, and so then I can talk about it. And sometimes they say, what's with the dog? And that's very insulting, obviously, because they don't know a dog from a cow. That's
Right.
their problem. But
Moline might get her feelings hurt,
she doesn't appreciate that. But
So you mentioned that your first book came out in 2020. Can you tell us some about your publishing journey, how you got to that point?
Well, I had written actually 4 full novels before that first book that was published. And those 4 books had all been rejected by various agents and editors multiple times over the previous 4 or so years before that. And then the sowing season then was my 5th book that I'd written. And it actually also got quite a few rejections. But as we all know, it only takes one yes.
Yes.
So it did get a yes from Dave Long at Bethany House. And so that was my first published novel, but my 5th written novel.
Okay. I know before that you also had a history in doing some songwriting.
Right. Yep. I had spent several years doing that, which I really enjoyed. I mean, and it's really fun, and I think is also really good practice for writing a book, because you have to be really aware of your story, because in a song you only have like 3 minutes to tell a complete story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to get good at like getting to the heart of the story, and you have to get good at like discerning what's important to keep and what's not, right?
Yes.
Because you can only keep the very most important things, because again, you only have 3 minutes. So then if you have a 300-page novel, but the principle still applies, I think it carries over. And I think that was really good practice for me before starting to write novels.
Yes. Learning how to use your words wisely.
Yeah.
So you call yourself a mom to the 3rd power. What does that mean?
That means biological, adoptive, and foster. So I have children in each category.
Yes, they keep you busy, don't they?
Yes.
And you have a book coming out next year called Birds on a Wire, and it's drawn from your personal experience as a foster mom. And I know this novel is close to your heart. Can you give us a glimpse into the story?
First of all, that novel is one of those first 4 books that I wrote way back in the day that got rejected. So Birds on a Wire used to have a different title and got rejected by all of the houses you can think of in the Christian market. And I had tucked it away, hoping that maybe someday I could go back to it, because, like you said, it is really close to my heart, and it's a story I feel is really important, and I'm really passionate about. Like, I want to see more authentic representation of foster care in fiction. And so over the years, I kind of would keep going back to it, and I revised it a little bit. I changed the title. I would touch it up And then we would sometimes here and there send it out again to maybe there's a new editor at this one place maybe, or the same editor, but say, hey, we changed some things, hoping that maybe at some point it would get a second chance. And eventually it finally did at a house that previously had rejected it. This time we're willing to give it another look and said yes. So I was super excited about that. I just knew that I didn't want to give up on that one.
Right.
And so the story is about a foster mom and a bio mom who both love the same baby, and they form a very tenuous friendship over caring for the baby and over the idea of who is the best mother for this baby.
Yeah.
And obviously it is drawn a lot from personal experience. And I really wanted to show how, like, foster parents are just normal people who are just trying to help. They're not like saintly people, or as they're sometimes depicted as kind of abusive or manipulative people who are like doing it to exploit kids.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you'll see that, and that does happen. Unfortunately, that does happen. But the majority of foster parents are just regular people. They don't have any special abilities. They're just trying their best to help out. And then on the flip side, the majority of bio parents whose kids are taken are also just regular people who have made some bad choices. They're not monsters, you know. And again, there are exceptions. Some of them are. But for the most part, the majority of them want their children and love their children and want them back, and have just, you know, gotten themselves into a bad situation. And so it's important to me to kind of educate people on that, because I think a lot of people don't know a lot about that world and what foster care is really like.
And so here's something from your own life that you can draw from and kind of give them a glimpse in a way that is, you know, storytelling is powerful in its own way. You know, it can grab your heart different than, you know, maybe even, you know, some other way that you might try to get this message across. You know, Jesus used stories, you know.
Right.
And so
he didn't just tell statistics about this is how many people are living in poverty in Jerusalem or whatever.
Right.
You know, because you can do that. I mean, and I have that. There's stats, you know, all these stats about kids and stuff. But to tell that story, to give them that look into a life, to give that perspective, I think is what changes people's hearts.
Yes. I'm really looking forward to reading that next year. So
Thank
can't
you.
wait.
Yeah. So it'll be about 10 years later from when I wrote it that it'll finally be published.
Wow.
So you just never give up.
That's
you never
right.
know. You just never know.
So besides writing and motherhood, what are some of the other delights in your life?
Well, I love to go for like walks and hikes. I mean, I live in Montana, so there's so many great like trails and mountains, and even just the regular walk around town is I can see the mountains. It's a great place for outdoor activity, so I really love to do that kind of thing. I also love reading. I do a lot of reading. I also really like food. I love like baking food or like coming up with food, you know, ideas. And I think that's partly, I guess, just because as a mom, you know, and I'll have 4 kids or whatever to feed, and I want them to feel like loved and cared for by feeding them well. And so I like that. Other than that, yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
Yes. That is more than enough to keep one on their toes.
Yeah.
I like that too. You know, people talk about, you know, like the 5 love languages, and I understand those and I see that they're real, but I also think food is a love language.
Yeah. I guess it could fall under gifts maybe, but like, or acts of service. But like, I just, as a mom, it's very important to me like that they feel loved in that way.
Yes.
You know, it's such a, I mean, and it's not, I don't want to say it's an easy thing, because it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But in a way, that's a very simple way to just let them know that, you know, that you care about them and that you want good things for them, you know?
Right. Now, is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
My favorite scripture recently, and basically since I can remember, is Galatians 6:9, which is, it says, you know, do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And I think that has been so important to me because life is really hard. And I have faced a lot of hard things. And so it is very tempting sometimes to kind of want to just give up. And sometimes, especially like just say with foster care, for example, sometimes you're like, what's the point? Why keep doing this? Why keep serving in this way when, like, does it make any difference? There's still 400,000 kids in foster care, like, it can feel so overwhelming. And that verse just always reminds me, like, don't grow weary. It says, do not grow weary in doing good.
Right.
It's not a chore. Doing good is not a chore. And it can sometimes start to feel that way. And I don't like that when I start to feel like the drudgery of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that verse has always been really special to me for that reason.
Yeah. Now, how can readers connect with you?
My website has all the things you could need on it. So at katiepowner.com, there's my links to all my socials, information about all the books and links to the books, links to my blog, a contact form, a way to sign up for my newsletter. All of that is all at katiepowner.com.
All right. We'll hope to send some people that way.
I hope to see them there.
Listeners, I hope you will go to katiepowner.com to learn more about Katie and see her books. I am very excited about her release that comes out tomorrow, as well as Birds on a Wire coming out next year. And you can find all about her at katiepowner.com. That's KATIEPOWNER.com. Now, I didn't find any pictures of Moulin on her website, but if you would like to see Moulin and check her out, you can go to her website and then follow the links to her social media, and you are sure to see Moulin there. If you're looking for an author who is similar to Katie, one that I would highly recommend is Sarah Brunsvold. I really enjoy her books. They are more women's fiction than contemporary, but they are just so excellent and really capture your heart in a similar way that Katie's do. And Sarah's new book, The Atlas of Untold Stories, is one that is going to be one of my favorites this year. I know I've been recommending it a lot. It's about a mom and 2 adult daughters who go on a road trip around the literary sites of America. And as they're traveling, they really discover that it's often the stories of our own lives that are the hardest to tell, even to those closest to us. So if you have read Katie's books and are looking for other ones to check out, I would highly recommend Sarah Brunsvold. And if you would like to get to know her, you can find my interview with her on my YouTube channel. Just look up The Well-Read Llama or author Erin Mifflin, and then scroll to find Sarah Brunsvold. Please do take a moment to follow me on social media if you would. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, and you can also visit my website to sign up for my monthly newsletter, authorerinmifflin.com. Until next time, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.